All right, let's take a good deep breath. As I shift gears here once again, I'd like to tell a story, a master story. The master was sitting in his cottage one late afternoon, reading a book by the fireplace, enjoying a nice glass of wine, doing the thing that the true master does, just taking it easy now and then. Master teaches a lot of classes, and days are pretty full, but master knows that every once in a while he just has to take time by himself. But he was sitting reading the book, and suddenly he got one of these bells. A bell going off, but it was a nudge. It was a knowingness that suddenly he had to put down the book and put on his cloak and go out for a walk. Now, the interesting thing is the master didn't know why, and the master doesn't question. Because once you question, you start going mental. Once you say, now, why am I feeling this? And is it just me? Or what should I be doing? What's spirit trying to tell me? No. The master felt this bell go off, a nudge, put on his cloak and knew to just go for a walk. Not knowing why, not knowing where it was leading to. And that is such an important point for all of you. You're going to just feel something. And what you used to do was think about it and diagnose it and dissect it and analyze it and get stupid about it. Now it's just time to go into your knowingness, as the master did. He put on his cloak and he walked out the door, not knowing whether you should turn left or right or go straight, not knowing one bit. But knowing and trusting in himself enough to know that it was going to be the right way, the right place. He walked for about 7 minutes, and finally he came to the little lake on the campus, surrounded by large, beautiful trees. And there at the park bench, this late afternoon by the lake, was one of his students, Christina, crying, sitting on the park bench sobbing. The master stopped for a moment. He had felt a lot of things going on with Christina lately, like there was something really tormenting her, so he really wasn't surprised to see her crying. She was a good student. She was definitely dedicated, committed to her realization. She had a basic good grasp of her energy, but there was something that was interfering, something getting in the way. He stood there for a moment, feeling into Christina, really feeling into whether it was okay to approach her or perhaps he should just walk away. But as he felt into it, not trying to get words in his head and not having Christina's higher self talking to him, he just felt into the energy, as you should be doing. Don't get all mental about it. Don't get all crapped up in your brain. Don't wait to hear some big voice. Just feel into it. That's your knowingness. That's what the master did. He felt into it. And it seemed very appropriate to approach her, almost like the energies were inviting him in. So he cleared his throat a few times so as not to scare her as he approached her on the park bench. And she stayed there with her head in her hands, sobbing. The master just sat down next to her. Not saying any words, not saying something stupid like, "How are you doing?" How was she supposed to reply to that? Isn't that what most humans, "How are you doing?" "I'm having a breakdown. I don't want to live anymore." "How are you doing?" No. The master just sat there. I'm gladly amusing Linda. The master just sat down beside her and get used to it, just being there. The master just allowed his light to shine. He didn't have to work at it. He didn't have to click a button, say, light go on. The true master is always shining a light. The master just sat there for a bit and not trying to send her all sorts of good vibe energy, not trying to heal her, not doing any chants or prayers. He didn't pull any incense out of his pocket and light it up to smudge and clear the air. None of that. He just sat there. That was the perfect thing to do. That's what she needed. She didn't need a bunch of talk at that moment. She didn't need a bunch of lectury advice from an old man. And she certainly didn't need the incense smell all around her. Sometimes humans have this weird concept of trying to help other people, and it's a damn intrusion in my book. Sometimes just the presence, when you feel there's an invitation, just the presence, and not a lot of words, if any words. So the master sat down beside Christina. She knew he was there. She could detect it right away. And he just sat, not saying anything, just not trying to inflict himself on Christina, just sat there. At a point, about 5 minutes later, Christina stopped crying. Kind of caught her breath, wiped the smudges off of her face. The master reached into his pocket, into his cloak, and pulled out a flask of brandy and handed it to her without a word. She took a big hit off of it, and then a deep sigh of relief. Now, it's not that the master should always carry a flask of brandy, but it's not a bad idea on occasion. It's exactly what Christina needed, just something to break the whole emotional, cathartic situation she was in. The master knew she needed to go through this to a degree, but he also realized that she'd gotten caught in it. She was swirling in it now. The master realized there were some issues in her life, things that hadn't turned out the way she had wanted, and specifically related to a relationship she had had, relationship that had gone on for about 5 years. She hadn't married this gentleman, but they had lived together, and he had just picked up and left. Barely any notice, just said it's over, and she was devastated. Christina said to the master finally, said, "It's just not my destiny to ever know love." The master just sat there. There are times when it's better not to say anything. The master just sat there. And she said, "You know, master, this isn't the first time. The relationship before this lasted 2 years, and the one before that lasted barely 8 months, and the one before that was about 5 years, 6 years." And she said, "It's just not meant to be that I ever have a relationship in this lifetime." The master truly understood, for before allowing his realization, he went from one relationship to the other, trying to find answers, trying to find meaning, and trying to find love, and none of them worked. He knew what it was like to face the darkness of love, but eventually to emerge with the love of self, and then that's all you need. But then when you have the love of self, then you can really have a relationship with another in true love. Christine started to talk. I guess the large swig of brandy helped loosen her tongue a little bit, but she started to talk, and she said, "Master, I went to counseling recently." This very word, the master rolled his eyeballs, kind of like what Linda did. Counseling. Oh my God. Counseling is for addicts. Master thought to himself. He didn't dare say that to Christina, but counseling is for addicts. The type of human counseling there is right now. They're addicted to their issues, and the counseling reinforces their issues. The counseling gets them deeper into their issues rather than resolving them. Counseling oftentimes actually helps create more of a victim and abuser consciousness than anything. And Calder is chiding me right now, and I'm not saying all counselors, but counseling in general is like that. It doesn't look at root causes. It tries to patch and repair. And when that doesn't work, medications. Christina said, "Master, I've been going to counseling lately, trying to find answers to why I simply can't have a good relationship, why it always starts out good. It starts out, I truly think it's the best love I've ever found, but then we start having disagreements, then we start arguing, then there's coldness, then there's silence, then there's accusations, and it just goes from beautiful, blissful to bad. My counselor told me that I'm creating all of this. And my counselor said that the real reason what's really happening here is that I have a wounded inner child. And she wants me to do an inner child retreat. It's going to take about a month and going to cost about $8,000. But I go to these seminars 3 or 4 times a week and learn about my wounded inner child. The master was thinking to himself, I'm going to drink this whole flask of brandy for myself if I hear any more about this, because he realized that that is truly a bunch of psychological crap. The master listened to Christina talk for a little while more. He knew it was important for her to just get it out. He hardly said a word. He nodded his head once in a while, rolled his eyeballs a lot, but hardly said a word. And finally, when she had kind of exhausted herself from speaking, finally the master said, Christina, the problem has nothing to do with a wounded inner child. It's the wounded adult, actually. I want you to close your eyes for a moment, Christina. And remember when you first came to this planet in this lifetime, when you were born into this lifetime. I want you to remember what it was like to have such a pure knowingness of why you were here on the planet. A pure knowingness of what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go. And this stayed with you. When you were 1 and 2 years old, you were doing things like talking to the elementals and the fairies and me and others. And that was truly beautiful. When you were 3 and 4 years old, still having that clear remembrance, but now becoming more aware of the world around you and its idiosyncrasies, its challenges and difficulties, but still remembering clearly. And when you were 5 years old and maybe even up to 6, still having that clear consciousness about why you were here and what you were going to do. So Christina, you don't have a wounded inner child. It always knew. It always knew. You have a wounded teenager and a wounded adult, a very wounded adult, but this whole thing with wounded inner children, no. It just isn't so. It's one of these new age type of things that sounds good, but feel into it for yourself. He said, I want you to feel into that inner child, into yourself. Bring it here. You know there's no time, there's no past and future, so be your inner child right now. Feel into that. Christina sat there for a little while with Master very silent. And at first she was struggling because, you see, the whole setup for her had been her inner child was wounded, so she expected a wounded inner child and acted out accordingly. But she kept on breathing and feeling into it, and eventually she could feel her younger self, her inner child, so to speak. And suddenly she felt its clarity. And it knew why she came here, and it was preserved within her. It got buried, it got not lost, but it gotten overshadowed by so many other things in life, but that inner child and its purity and its true knowingness was still there, and it hit Christina. Oh, like a brick, it hit her, and she knew exactly that it wasn't a wounded inner child. It was simply things that had happened in life that had gotten her off course, that had caused her to deviate, or at least think she had deviated from her true mission or mission on this planet. She felt into it for a while, and it just started streaming through her. The beauty of this crystal clear young child that she was, and then all the challenges, all the clouds and the shadows and the darkness of humanity swirling and causing her to, that inner child, to go into hiding, but not wounded. It was going in to protect itself so it could emerge at the right time with clarity. it streamed through her this remembrance of her true, pure child self. And then all the things that it caused it to go into hiding, all the things into her teens, and whether it was feeling she was promiscuous or hurting other people or doing drugs at an early age or getting married or having bad partners along the way. And then she realized that no, there was no wounded inner child. And if she could come back to that knowingness and certainty of this young child that she was, that would help her to understand all the other things that happened. The Master could feel she was at that point of reconnecting, and the Master said, now, take a deep breath and let that youthful innocence come back again. You've been hardened by the world around you. You've turned skeptical and cynical. Now let that innocence come back. It's time. And she did. The Master knew now was the time to get up and leave. She was going through her thing. She was going through a union or reunion within herself. He quietly stood up. And just as he was about to walk away, Christina looked up at him with beautiful but still tearful eyes and said, Master, would you leave your flask of brandy with me? Dear Shambra, you don't have wounded inner childs. You have that inner self, that youthful, bright, innocent, pure knowingness of yourself that has been hidden away for a long time. It's not wounded. It never was. Human, the adult, the teenager maybe. And it's been kind of put away, sheltered from the craziness of life, but it's time to bring that back. Let's put on some music for Marab. There is no wounded inner child. There is the teenage, adult, whatever, middle age, even senior that took on way too much. That wasn't theirs. Took on way too much.
Dê sua contribuição consciente. Se chegou até aqui, inscreva-se, dê seu like, compartilhe, comente e obrigado por nos assistir.